Councilmember Bana.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. So I believe I know everyone except for Michael. We might have met before, but excuse my memory. I'm Sohaila Bana, Richmond City Council member. I would appreciate if you could tell me your position. Or actually, if everybody, we could go around and everybody introduce themselves because we are recording this.
I'll start then. Adam Springer, Assistant Director, Contra Costa County Hazardous Materials Programs. I'll hand it over to Mike.
I'm Michael Dassey. I'm the Supervisor and Accident and Release Prevention Engineer here at Contra Costa County.
Thank
And
you.
Lena Velasco, Director of Community Development for City of Richmond. Richard.
And Richard Diaz, Emergency Services Manager with the city's fire department.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I'm very glad that the county has adopted a new ordinance, safety ordinance for tanks, and the city adopted it with minor changes replacing the word city for county, I assume. And there was a, hi, Chief Osorio.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us.
I have 30 minutes. Sorry, I have conflicting things I can be for the first 30.
We hope we wrap it up in 30 minutes. Thank you very much. So I noticed that there's a size for the tanks. I have some very basic questions. How do we categorize tanks? Who does the safety inspection at what stage, like when they're established? Is it annual? So how does the safety watching system works and inspections and everything and different categories of tanks, who's in charge? Basically,
Yeah, maybe,
that's it.
Yeah, and maybe I mean, it seems like there's kind of several umbrellas here, but so the city will be the permitting agency when somebody comes to seek to build a new tank farm or a tank terminal or a new tank. You know, they have to typically get a conditional use permit because they'll be handling a hazardous materials. And then at the same time, like they'll have to get building permits, and then we do inspections. We'll work with the fire department or fire prevention bureau. And so I guess in that regard, that's an element of just the overall permitting. But I think what we also have been working with the county is under an industrial safety ordinance. And Adam, I don't know if you're the right person or if it's Michael, but if you want to talk a little bit more about what the industrial safety program looks at, kind of the human factors and how we can prevent incidents by kind of looking at those things more carefully.
I can talk a little bit about that. So our industrial safety ordinance, the way it was drafted for the tank terminals is really putting them into certain process safety programs that we look at. So procedures, training, maintenance, mechanical integrity, management of change, pre-startup safety review, I'm sure incident investigation. There might be another one that I forgot. All those different safety programs are components of what's called the CAWARP program, or the California Accidental Release Prevention Program. There's a lot of similarities between the CAWARP program and Cal OSHA's Process Safety Management Requirements, PSM. And so there's a lot of overlap between those different groups. But because of the New Star tank terminal incident in 2019, we were directed to develop with stakeholders some kind of process safety set of requirements for the tank terminals. And so it took a couple of years to do that with everybody's involvement. The intent is this is not, the ISO is not for your initial permitting of a facility. So like your fire department would handle a lot of the permitting of the actual tanks. Your building department would handle a lot of the permitting of an actual new business and all that. This doesn't replace that or supplement anything with that. Once they are established, the tank terminal industrial safety ordinance would require them to submit what's called a safety plan, similar to what the Chevron refinery has to submit, but toned down to just what they're required to do. That summarizes those safety programs that they have, and they submit that because it's in the ISO part that was sent it to the county. The way the RISO works is we sort of by default do those same inspections. We do the same reviews for the City of Richmond for the safety plans that are submitted. So the tank terminals in the City of Richmond would send those to us. We would look them over. We would also do the audits and slash inspections when that all takes place. We are currently doing a guidance, we're developing a guidance document to go along with the tank terminals. And so those, the process to develop the guidance document is getting the tank terminals facility representatives themselves to participate and, I clarify in the language if clarification needs to be done to the ISO. So we say we want mechanical integrity done. What does that mean for a tank terminal? So we have those discussions and we try to put that down into a guidance document, but it's just guidance. It's not saying you have to do the following. It is, here's how you would, one way to comply with what the Richmond Industrial Safety Ordinance, identifies. So that's sort of a broad approach of what we do, what we intend to do for the tank terminals.
Thank you. So you mentioned that you require the owner of the tank farm to have a safety plan. How do you verify that the training happens, the safety plan works, everything's in place?
Yes, that will come over time. So we can't do that today because the way the ordinance was drafted, it gives all tank terminals 1.5 years to submit the safety plan, and that's 1.5 years after the development of the guidance document that says, here's what you should put in your safety plan. And so we first have to develop the guidance document, and then they have a year and a half later to identify or develop their own plan to submit it to us. Along the process, as we're developing the guidance document, we're going to be developing essentially our audit protocols, how we're going to go out and look at the facilities for these things. The facilities are also going to be developing if they need to change any of their training programs or if they need to change any of their procedures. They'll be doing that before I would suspect that they would be doing that before we show up. And so we're not going to be inspecting those facilities until the guidance document is, worked through in that process. So typically we don't inspect a facility until we get a safety plan. But this is new, right? So when I joined the county, we already had an industrial safety ordinance. We already had some safety plans. Like when I came 24 years ago, we started doing our inspections. There's a little bit of a delay right now. We don't just go out there and do inspections because they don't know what we're going to look for. And so we need to make sure they're aware of the things that we're looking for, make sure we're all on the same page before we go out there, because nobody wants to go out there and then all of a sudden we say, oh my gosh, you don't have this, you don't have that, because all they're going to say is, well, none of that's required because the ISO doesn't say it. And so it's sort of an agreement, essentially, the guidance document as it gets developed of, okay, all that sounds good. Or at least if we list these 5 things, they go, any of these 5 things would be great to have. And they go, great, yeah, we got one of those. Or hey, we got 2 of those, So they have ways of making sure that they have pretty good feeling that they're going to be in compliance.
Thank you. So what's new in this tanks ISO is basically this guidance document that they need to have, and then your inspection afterwards. You give them 1.5 years, and you said that the audit, how often will you do the inspection and audit after that?
Currently, we do them every 3 years, so they'll probably just fall in the same 3-year frequency. I don't have on the tip of my tongue if the Richmond ISO or our ISO says when we have to do our first inspection. So that I would have to look up to see if it says anything like that. I don't think it does, but traditionally, for something of this kind of process, we develop the guidance document with the stakeholders so they get a feel for what all we're going to be looking for. So there's no surprises. And so, okay, once we develop the guidance document, then they have a year and a half to say, here's the safety plan submittal. That safety plan submittal is essentially the document that says, here's all the ways we are in compliance with all these different programs. So, I mean, just to be off the cuff, I would say our audit/inspections will probably correspond when they submit their safety plan. And so, because they have already then identified, here's how we're going to be complying with the Richmond ISO or the county's ISO. And so we have that document that says, oh, here's what they said they're going to do. Let's go verify, are they really doing what they said they're going to do? But I'd have to look at the actual ISO wording itself, but I don't think there's a date in there that says otherwise. So it would probably correspond with the safety plan.
Thank you. And is it written, this ISO, by chemical engineers or in collaboration with the fire department? What type of expertise has been used to draft it?
All the above.
The ordinance or the guidance?
Well, both, everything. I mean,
Yeah.
educate us.
Yeah, the ordinance was developed over, I want to say, a year and a half process. Myself and the group I work with are chemical engineers and mechanical engineers. We just hired a petroleum engineer, but she wasn't involved with this project. And so for anybody in our office that's working on this, we also have other hazmat specialists that were involved. But for the regulation or the ordinance, it was written by a lot of engineers, but we had contributions from stakeholders, and we have a list of stakeholders that include a number of facility representatives. There's also agency representatives from our department, from City of Richmond. There's others, there's City of Martinez on there. There's there's fire departments, a variety of fire departments. There's public involvement, so there's public interest groups or just individuals that are just curious on how this is playing out. So there was about 45, I think, on that email list of what we call our stakeholder group. And there's a good mixture of everybody. So I don't know what education wise is for any of the non-staff people that we have here. For the guidance document, the core group that's going to be developing the guidance document is also our group. So chemical engineers, mechanical engineers are developing the guidance document along with facility representatives. And we've never asked what their background is. It's just, they've been working for TransMontaigne or Chevron or, Kinder Morgan or they're in that role for process safety, and they've been there, 10 years or 15 years or whatever. So that's about all we know. And I say that, but I don't know it for any individual. I couldn't recount how many years experience anybody has, but that's the flavor of people involved. Our meeting today was a subgroup, right? So our full stakeholder group has about 45 people that get invited. Not everybody shows up. Our smaller group of people that are developing it, I want to say the number was 11, I think, on the call today. It might have been higher because I think there are a few people in the room, but so you're looking at a very small number compared to the full stakeholder group. And then developing that guidance will take time. We have a number of chapters that we have to get through. And again, it's guidance. So our department can't just say, you need to do the following. It needs to be worked out in a way that everybody's not in their head saying, oh yeah, we do that already, or yeah, we could do that, or we do that. And so it's all done in agreement, essentially.
Thank you very much. So it's pretty much what we had for the refineries before, but now extending it to the tank farms, I assume. And that guidance document, what incidents does it consider, like mechanical failure, earthquake, fire? What is it supposed to cover?
Well,
real quick, can I make a clarification or ask something here? This ordinance applies to terminals, correct? And that was the basis of the New Star incident. It was not a tank farm. There's already existing rules for tank farms. This was because New Star kind of fell in this weird gray area of a terminal where product isn't stored, but is temporarily placed before it goes somewhere else. And so there was some loopholes as far as regulations. So you have to be very careful in the terms we use in this world of hazmat and industrial, because you say tank farm, and that means something very different, Councilmember Bana. There already is existing rules for tank farms that the refinery already has to abide by.
So Kinder Morgan Tank Farm, for example, it doesn't affect them. They already have their own guidance document?
They're not a tank farm, they're a terminal.
Terminal. So
Yes.
what
66 is a
distinguishes?
terminal. Like
That's being-
Chevron on the hillside and Chevron overlooking the bay, that's a tank farm. Kinder Morgan is a terminal. Phillips 66 is a terminal for
Could you
Richmond.
explain what distinguishes a terminal from a tank farm?
Somewhere that product is going temporarily before it is put in some mode of transport, correct? If I'm trying to say it in lay terms, before it goes on a boat, before it goes in a pipe, before it goes somewhere, or it's temporary, it's sitting in a terminal that's gonna be distributed out somewhere. Versus a tank farm is more long-term storage. Now, I don't know what defines how long it could sit there, or any of that, but that was the kind of the problem with New Star. It looks like a tank farm, but I don't think stuff was ever it was never classified as that.
Okay, where is New Star located exactly?
That's in the, well, it's unincorporated, but it's near the town of Rodeo.
Cummings
Got it.
Skyway.
Okay, yeah, I know where that
Almost.
is, but just wanted to clarify that it's not in Richmond. Okay. So, okay, and I'm sorry, Chief Osorio, so could you name the tank farms that we have that are not terminals? Are those Chevron tanks?
For the most part, yeah.
Okay.
Mike, I think you have a list of facilities that may be impacted by RISO. Do you have that
Yeah.
list handy?
We
I think it was
do.
Kinder, Phillips 66,
IMTT.
IMTT,
IMTT.
and
Vantage.
Transmontane.
There's- yeah.
Transmontane.
The Phillips 66 Richmond Terminal, Transmontane Richmond Terminal, the Kinder Morgan Terminal, and then IMTT.
Yeah.
Which I don't even know what that stands for, I'll be honest, but
I forget what it is, but it's right there on Cutting. They're all,
Is that
for us, a
the
lot of them are
food-
on the port, basically, like they're in areas that they can, they usually receive and distribute their product via vessel. Like, other than
Okay.
Kinder Morgan, who does it through their pipeline system.
Okay, that's the food oil, I guess, right?
They used to do like food grade oils, coconut oils. I think
Yeah.
they've kind of diversified some of their things, but yeah, they're predominantly are known for like their coconut oil products that they bring in.
Okay, thank you. So now we get to the question about the size and quantity of the tanks that's in the ordinance. I had a question originally about the size. How about tanks that are below that threshold? Do we have any? Is there any ordinance pertaining to them?
So there are a lot of other tanks in Richmond that are below that size, right? You have a lot of tanks in that area that hold hazardous materials or petroleum products. I'm sure the fire district regulates them, and Chief Osorio can speak about that. We also have the Above Ground Storage Tank Act, which is under fire code, that also addresses any tank that stores petroleum products as well. Anything above 1,320 gallons storage on site, which could be even lower if they have a on-site storage above total quantities, not just a single container. So those sites do also get inspections. By
Those
us
fall into
and-
Coupa too, right, Adam?
Yes, that all
Maybe
falls under
most-
Coupa. And
Yeah.
then I'm sure that the fire district also inspects under fire code certain facilities within that
I'm
as well.
sorry, what is Coupa?
Certified Unified Program Agency. Those are the core regulations for health and safety code, California code regulations that deal with above ground petroleum storage, underground storage tanks, generating hazardous waste, or storing any amount of hazardous materials above threshold quantities.
And how
Basically,
often do they-
everybody who's in the hazmat world, industrial world in the county it goes through Coupa inspections. This is beyond that, where the industrial safety ordinance. Some of these facilities already fall, and like the bigger facilities, tank farms, they already fall under Coupas. They already have regular hazmat inspections by the county, and they have their annual fire inspections by Fire Prevention Bureau inspectors that test fire suppression systems, structures that are meant for occupancy, for like offices, anything that's fire code related, we inspect that portion. The county does the Coupa inspection. And oftentimes we will do joint inspections on some of these facilities too with them.
So that fire repression system, is that annual or 3 years?
Depends on the system. There's different codes for different types of systems. Some sprinkler systems, we're going to have annual inspections. Some of them have to have 5-year testing inspections. I think you're kind of going down a rabbit hole that's probably way more detailed in the weeds than we need to get. Whatever the fire code is that is applicable to their facility and their components, that's the type of inspection we conduct.
Okay, but do those smaller tanks also have guidance documents?
We just go by regulations for, there's no guidance for small tanks. It's regulated.
Yeah.
So it's fire code or California code regulations or health and safety code. They're all codes, no guidance.
Ball's already under rules.
Yeah.
They don't get to do whatever they want. There's defined rules already for them.
Yeah, but big tanks were regulated before too, right? But we developed guidance document. We are developing guidance
Yeah,
documents.
we're going above and beyond what's regulatory required.
So should we expect that in the near future, there will be a similar process for smaller tanks?
I'd like to jump in a little bit just to get a difference. I mean, a lot of the prescriptive requirements that the fire chief and Adam are talking about are related to what's in the codes themselves or the regs themselves. They're very prescriptive on how to address certain things. Process safety requirements are more general. They say they need to have operating procedures for the process. You can have a handwritten procedure, or you could have a typed up procedure. A facility could have 100 procedures, or a facility could have 5 procedures. They all could be right. They all could be accurate. They all could be meeting the regulation. But there's a gradation of what could be better, what could, be improved upon. And that's why sometimes a guidance document is beneficial when you get into process safety things that don't have a rigid requirement. The ISO and the RISO, they don't say how that tank can be built. It has nothing to do with that. That's all other codes and standards that have to deal with that. And those are very specific. The only thing that the ISO and RISO are there to deal with is how are you managing, from a management system, how are you going to manage to keep everything, in the tanks? Train the
This is
people.
about spills, not about process.
Exactly.
This is how are we going to try to reduce and eliminate spills, accidental spills?
And there's been over time, there's been some improvements in that, but they're not requirements. They're just like, oh, best practice would be to do that. You can't require them to do that because that's not in the code. That's not in the ISO. That's not in the RISO. But if you identify some of these things, the more you identify, the more you talk about it, the more people tend to gravitate towards it. And so that's the intent of having the guidance document, is to get everybody to recognize, oh yeah, it's a best practice, we'll work towards that. But it's hard to come down to a regulatory body to say, is that required? Because some of that is not required, and a good chunk of it is not required, but it's encouraged.
And could you please remind me what R in RISO stands for?
Richmond.
The Richmond
R's.
Industrial Safety
How do you not know what the R stands for? You're the council
Okay, I
person.
thought it was something like revised ISO, or it's our own
The Richmond,
ISO.
it's the one you voted to adopt. It's the Richmond code.
I didn't know it had an acronym. Okay, excellent. So I wish we had a map of the tanks in the city of Richmond, both terminals and other ones. I assume you guys have a map, right?
Yeah, we will.
Oh,
I
you
think we
will?
provided
Great.
a map. Yeah, we provided a map generally of the locations, and I think once they submit, I mean, we have them on, I'm sure, fire too, in terms of knowing what's on the facility and the site location. Like there are just general
Yeah.
maps. IMTT has submitted recently to do a project at their site, so we will typically, you know, in processing their use permit, confer with the fire department and others, sometimes the county staff too, depending on the type of product that they'll be handling, at least from an environmental standpoint. So, but I think they're all pretty much located at the port. I think too, you know, we will probably look at more detailed mapping as they submit their safety plans.
Okay,
They
if
won't
there's
tell
a-
us everything.
Those are
Yes.
internal maps, though. Those are not maps we're
Yeah.
distributing to.
Oh, it's not for the public.
No.
Okay, no
There's a
problem.
reason, the same with Kinder Morgan. We don't, there's too much of a risk. You know, we still have to think about bad actors and terrorism threats and targets. You know, we're managing people's expectation to information with ultimately their safety. And there's no need for anybody to know specifics other than the general location of where these are at. But we don't want to give too much
Understandable.
info out there.
I respect that. My last question, and trying to keep it to 30 minutes as promised, is could you give us examples of guidance document in case of something happening, how that document provides the best solution? I mean, what is it? And is it something that I assume some people need to know by heart at the site, or it's going to be a folder, they're going to turn pages when something happens to, how does it work?
I don't know about how it can work, but I can put in the chat a link to our existing guidance document for our other industrial safety ordinance facilities. And so there's a lot of chapters. That just gets you to the main page. There's probably 20 chapters in total, maybe a few appendices. They all deal with a different slice of something. But that's an example of an existing guidance document that we have for our refinery, like Chevron Refinery. That's the guidance document they would use to comply with the Richmond ISO.
But do they have someone, some safety officers who would be in charge of it, always present at the site, who could act quickly? Or it's a document they have to go, you know, find online or turn pages to see what they have to do?
So
How does
that's
it practically
globally, right?
work?
So the guidance doc is to how they're managing the entire facility, training, making sure things are that you have testing done on equipment, that all these components are all brought into under that guidance thing. It's not something that you have to, during an emergency, flip open a page, because that's not what it's for. That's
Yeah.
to prevent it, right?
Not a workflow.
No,
But
that's
I thought
completely
it
separate.
would also have a chapter about like spills or things like that. It doesn't?
Emergency response would be a topic, but all it
Separate section.
is identifying the facility has to have an emergency response plan or emergency action plan.
Oh.
That it's separate from the guidance document because it's theirs. And the emergency, let's say, action plan for Kinder Morgan might be a little bit different than what it is for Transmontane, but it's theirs because that's what they go to when there's a problem.
Yeah, they know where to
Okay.
go to flip the page to say, call Chief Osorio.
So,
It's my day off.
so you would make sure they do have an emergency response plan
Yes,
as
yes.
well. That's
There are
feasible,
multiple-
sufficient, and everything.
Yeah, there actually are multiple checks on that emergency response plan. I'm sure the chief has staff that probably check those emergency response plans. We check that on a business plan inspection that's checked, on a CalERP inspection that's checked. So there's multiple inspectors. Those are just not one inspector that check those emergency response plan components. They look at it overall, but they also make sure there are certain elements in it that meet certain requirements depending on jurisdictional authority. I did want to mention also before we end about all those smaller tanks that you had discussed. You said that are they being regulated? And my answer is yes, they are being regulated. I can give you an idea of the frequency that we do regulate them. So for tanks that are less than 10,000 gallons, we're going to talk about petroleum tanks here because that's majority of our tanks here in Contra Costa County. Less than 10,000 gallons, we inspect those every 3 years. If you have between 10,000 and 100,000 gallons of storage, that's not individual tanks, that's all storage on the site, right? You're inspected every 2 years. And then when you get to the point of 100 million gallons or more, you're inspected every year. So that's our inspection frequency for the tanks itself, for the APSA or Above Ground Petroleum Storage Tank Act. So that's where we're inspecting the tanks themselves, as well as the engineered plans that go along with them regarding spills. That's not to mention that all of the other components that are inspected separately, for example, a hazardous materials business plan that inspects the chemicals necessarily inside them, and then all the emergency response plans as well. So there are a couple of different layers of that, of kind of inspections that occur at all these facilities.
So the tanks that we see on Kinder Morgan or refinery, what size are they?
They vary. Like some of them are a million gallons. You can drive in some of those tanks. You can drive a semi inside them, make a U-turn, and come out.
Yeah, like the tank at New Star that actually exploded had a 200,000 barrel capacity. That's 8.4 million gallons of petroleum-based product. Big tanks.
Wow.
They're that one's I think 150 feet in diameter, 64 feet tall.
Yeah, they don't look so big when you're really far away, but when you get up to them, they're huge.
Most of our facilities, they're bigger tanks. Not worth their time having a small tank to store that type of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Or just smaller, chemicals they use on the side for other processes. It's not worth anybody's money to store petroleum products in a 2,000 gallon tank.
Yeah, unless it's retail.
That's what's going down the road on wheels.
Yeah.
Those have more capacity than that.
Yeah, 6,000 gallons in a tanker on the road.
Yeah.
Six to 8.
Wow. Thank you very much. Very last question. Will they also have drills like refineries or no?
Drills.
I believe there is some kind of wording in the industrial safety ordinance that wants them to do at least coordination with the different agencies. And I don't know exactly if it says drills in the wording, but there will be something in there regarding making sure that they do something like that. But I'd have to look it up to see if there's actual drills listed.
Yeah,
all of these sites in Richmond, other than Transmontane, are mandated through other regulatory agencies to do annual tabletops and every 3 years, full-scale drills that simulate releases. Anybody who has access to the waterways and to the port, that's why Richard attended one for Phillips 66 earlier this year. I attended the Chevron one for the Long Wharf and for the tank farm that's on their grounds. So there's so many different layers of regulatory agencies that mandate different types of drills, different types of plans, response exercises. So I can speak firsthand that we have attended all of these facilities in our city. We've attended tabletop or full-scale drills with them, and most of them at a minimum are every 3 years, if not more frequent.
Yeah, we send representatives as well to all of those.
Yeah, I was just there with Trisha at Chevron.
Yep. Thank you very much, everyone. I greatly appreciate it. I don't have any more questions in the interest of time. Anything anybody wants to add before we wrap it up?
Thanks for bringing us all together.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
I greatly appreciate it. And thank you, Lena, for recording it. I'll share it with the public. I'm sure it gives some peace of mind about public safety in the city of Richmond. And I appreciate all of your great work. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Adam. Thanks, Chief Osorio. Thanks, Richard. And thank you, Lena.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.